Merchants. Merchants are scattered all across Wynncraft, providing unique gear that is kinda to be honest, but it doesn't compare to most armor you find out in the wild. But is it good enough to use to beat the entire game? Well, I decided to find out if these items have what it takes to let me beat every single boss in the game. That being said, the main rule of this challenge is that all gear that I use, including weapons, must be purchased directly from a merchant, and no, trade market does not count. Also, just to make things a bit more challenging, I will not be including items purchased from dungeon merchants or the merchants found at Kira Hive and Legendary Island, as they offer some pretty bonkers stuff. One last thing, just like my last run, due to how much content there is, this run is going to be broken up into two parts. The first part will consist of the early game and the mid game, and the second part will consist of the late game and the end game. The rules are posted down in the description below, so without further ado, don't forget to hit that subscribe and bell, and let's do this. To begin, I decided to go with Shaman simply because I have no faith whatsoever that these weapons are going to do me any good. Although, now that I think back upon it, I suspect the same will be true about the armor. My suspicions are confirmed as I visit the first armor merchant, located right away in Ragni. And one good look at his gear makes me question how the hell this guy is still in business. Fortunately, I do have another option. So I hike all the way over to Deathless where I can find some better gear. Being a complete idiot, I decide to fight this troll, which gets me killed. Well, let's try that again. So, once more, I attempt to traverse to Deathless, avoiding the troll this time, and by doing so, I manage to safely make it to— Oh, come on! Yeah, you know what? I think I actually will buy from you, dude. So, after getting geared up, I make the third trip to Deathless. Along the way, I also stop by Alekin Village to purchase a few accessories. They're not stellar by any means, as are most accessories, but the health regen may help. And so, after my pit stop, I finally make it to Deathless. I immediately pop by the armor merchant for a much better selection of gear. Unfortunately, however, I am still restricted by a level cap of 9, so I can't just buy whatever I please. Knowing this, I just make do with what I can use. I also make sure to grab a new relic at the weapon merchant because I honestly don't think my starter weapon is going to do the trick. So, with my Temu sourced gear in hand, I make my way into the Decrepit Sewers. Now, this fight was incredibly easy, as expected, since I have full gear at this point. On top of that, the fact that I'm able to do passive damage with my totem on top of my ranged melee makes me pretty much unstoppable. I get hit a few times, but even then, I'm barely taking any damage, allowing me to easily claim victory. Let's be real though, Decrepit Sewers isn't that difficult if you're fully geared. When I return to Deathless, I decide to go and purchase the best gear I can get my hands on, as well as a new weapon in preparation for one of the harder early game dungeons. Yo, is that a hunk cow? Oh my god! After barely surviving that encounter, I throw on the rest of my gear and progress onward into the Infested Pit. Infested Pit is home to Aracuda Charlotte, as I refer to her as, and she's decently tough for an early game boss. She's very fast and she hits hard, and on top of that, she uses a heavy hitting projectile pretty frequently. I honestly did not expect to take as much damage as I was, especially considering I had shoved all my skill points into defense. I just ended up doing a lot of running around and frequently topping off my health, hitting her with Aura Spell whenever I could. I definitely got a bit too cocky this fight, and I think it might have been the fact that I've been severely overestimating Shaman's defensiveness. But nonetheless, I do end up eventually claiming victory, getting rid of the pesky spider. Before I head over to Nemract, I discover there are some merchants in Bremengalar, so I take a quick trip over. Upon my arrival, however, I learn that the weapon merchant doesn't even offer me anything whatsoever. What are you, shamanist? The armor merchant, on the other hand, has an entire set available, but unfortunately this set prioritizes melee, and given that I don't have access to a decent melee relic, I decide to just pass on it. So, empty-handed, I continue onward to Nemract and check out the merchants there instead. Unfortunately, the gear offered here is more or less the same of what I'm currently using, but I get it anyway, as most pieces offer me some damage boosts. Before I can challenge the next dungeon, there's another fight halting my progress, the very first boss altar. Now, boss altars are usually tucked away in places most casual players are likely not to find, such as this one being located in the ocean in the Durham Isles. Wait, I have to tribute leather? Well, I think we all know where this is going.
Have a good night, everyone, because one of you is going to the slaughterhouse tomorrow.
Moo?
Of course it's not you, Raoul. You're one of the good boys.
Moo? Cowgirl, you lying to the cows again? Tain't right. Of course it's Raoul. Oh! Yeah, you better be worried, Raoul. They're out of the sharp axes. It's gonna take like an hour. Oh!
This is where things start to get extremely ugly. And yes, it's another hunk of cow. I'm not sure why we're doing this again. Anyways, he hits like a truck and I'm dealing absolutely no damage to him whatsoever. He eventually knocks me out of the arena by accident, which wasn't planned, but considering it's not against the rules for me to get knocked out, I'm not disqualifying the run based off of that. Unfortunately, however, I think this fight just might be impossible for me just given my current gear and skill. Yeah, I kinda suck. Unfortunately, I'm just one level shy of using an air weapon, which is what he's weak to, but I am effectively stuck at this point. Or was I? Seeing as this was my last resort, I ran all the way back to Breminglar and purchased the tribal set I had initially passed on. Melee would be pretty much my only hope, as Beef Wellington just moves around way too much for my totem to reliably deal damage to it. With my new set in place, I anxiously re-enter the boss altar. I begin by attempting to get rid of the pesky scarecrows, but I quickly learn that those are simply distracting me way too much, and I need to redirect my focus. Fortunately, I managed to come up with a plan halfway through the fight, which consisted of me running across the arena rather than in a circle. This way, I'm able to avoid the scarecrows, and it also makes it easier to hit the ungrounded beef. Get it? Because he's airborne? Okay, I won't do that again. Either way, the one downside is that this guy still hurts like mad, and in some of my attempts to evade him, I'm punished pretty hard. Nonetheless, I continue to set up my totem for some extra chip damage, focusing on hitting him as far away as possible, and by God, I actually managed to take down the stupid thing. I was really nervous I was going to need to restart the run, but for now, it lives on. And please game, no more hunk cows, we already have salted.
We got attacked by thieves on our way here, and I had to leave my family behind. Most of them died, unfortunately. I know my brother had his will on him during the attack. Knowing he was a rich fellow, I expect to be receiving a large part of his fortune? Excuse me, what? What kind of self-entitled shit? Anyway, it was now time to face what is probably the easiest boss of the entire game. And just to prove how confident I am, I didn't even wait until I hit level 24 to challenge him. For some reason, Charon is just a complete pushover, and I've had no difficulty ever fighting him, and thankfully this time was no different. Honestly, it feels really good to have an easy fight, especially after that last one, but I'm not sure that'll be the case for this next one. Next up is unfortunately another boss altar. If the last one taught me anything, it's that I shouldn't be terrified for what's to come. As much as I appreciate Shaman's passive damage, my defense is equivalent to that of wet toilet paper. So, needless to say, I was mostly dreading this fight. I should probably mention that as I go into this fight, I have not actually challenged the majority of these boss altars, so I was going to these fights pretty much blind, which, big surprise, was a terrible idea. That being said, I didn't anticipate on being swarmed by mobs, but fortunately my totem, puppets, and aura spell were capable of handling it. Sort of. Okay, maybe not. Okay, I have no idea how the hell I managed to survive that, but after quickly panic healing, I decided to immediately come up with a different strategy now that most of the mobs have been cleared out. Something I noticed was that the boss frequently gets hit by his minions, which causes him to target them instead of me. I abuse this to the absolute max as I stay as far away as possible, focusing primarily on getting rid of his minions. I noticed that my puppets seem to be putting in most of the work here, so I just attempt to chip at him with melee from afar and use aura whenever I can while he's in range of my totem. I do end up needing to heal pretty frequently as I end up catching a few stray shots, but overall the rest of the fight went pretty smoothly and I managed to successfully come out on top. At this point, I'm not sure if I'm grateful I picked Shaman or severely regretting it. But with that nightmare out of the way, I next set my sights on what I believe to be a rather difficult dungeon, Timelost Sanctum. I've said it before, but this is probably the hardest early game dungeon, but I was still relatively optimistic going in it. But before I head in, I briefly checked out the mysterious merchant in Tempo Town, as the gear he offers is pretty decent. So I decided to hunt around, killing a few time troubles until I wound up with around 4 tokens. It won't allow me to buy the relic, but if I can get another token, a gear piece might be useful. Unfortunately though, I won't be able to use it yet either way. Now, here's where I make a little bit of a mistake. As I enter the dungeon, one thing I didn't realize I forgot to do was to go and check the merchants over at Selchar, as they have gear available in my level range. But since I had no idea at the time, I'm still going to be rocking the tribal set, which, by the way, is meant for level 18.
Now, one of the benefits of being Shaman here is my incredibly long melee range, making me able to hit Garroth from afar. Additionally, my puppets don't despawn when my totem despawns, so it isn't very punishing when I need to quickly use a potion. Garroth does hit pretty hard, so I make sure to keep my health up to minimize the risk of being sniped. Luckily, the fight goes pretty smoothly, and while I get low a few times, overall it was much easier than the previous 2 boss altars I've conquered at this point. Garroth is always tricky though, no matter what, given his sporadic teleporting and explosions, so I always recommend just circling him or keeping your distance so he can't hit you.
Why won't you die?
It's now important to note that the level cap has increased drastically. This is the point where things get very interesting, as I'm now gaining access to a lot of gear pieces, and unlike the gear I've been using until this point, this new stuff is substantially better. I've been making do with what I've got, but I am in dire need of an upgrade at this point, so I set out across the sea in hunt of some very special merchants. Now, these special merchants are found in a remote place known as the Isle of Fiction, and they hold gear that has been sold exclusively during seasonal festivals. But fortunately for me, I have access to them at all times. At the cost of a hefty amount of emeralds, of course. But one good look at these gear pieces is enough to tell me this is where I'll be making a majority of my purchases for the entire run moving forward. The only downside, besides the cost, is that there are so many options that I'm basically required to come up with an optimal build. I'm not made of money, so I am going to have to pick and choose sparingly. Luckily for me, the earliest pieces I can get are fortunately right at the level cap of 36, so I find these extremely nifty boots along with these pants. Since some time had passed since I last picked up time fragments, I gathered a few more until I ended up with 7, and I purchased the tempo totem. I then ran over to Almuge where I got a temporary relic and also a better chestplate. However, I realized I wasn't quite done with Time Valley yet, and I hurried back over with my sights set on a certain merchant in the Pigment Ravines. The mask merchant sells a bunch of different unique masks, and I ultimately decided to go with the metal mask for added bulk. The water mask was intriguing, but seeing as how I'm currently a summoner, I'm not suffering from a mana shortage. You take a look inside of the furnaces. There's nothing except for an absurd amount of wood shavings for some reason. Oh, don't worry about that, eh? That's our fuel source. Excuse me, what? Escaping the horrors of the open sea, I venture back to Almuge where my next 2 challenges await me. But before I can do that, I go ahead and level up so I can put on my new armor pieces. Yes, this is exactly the look I was hoping for. I can't wait to strike fear into the hearts of my enemies. The almighty sentient iron block. Smash cake? Rip carpet? What the fuck? Anyway, after getting prepared and doing my least favorite quest, it was time for another wonderfully easy boss fight. Hasher, like Charon, suffers from chronic pushover disease. Wait, he only has 1 damaging spell? Huh, no wonder he's so easy. With Hasher out of the way, I go ahead and finally unlock regeneration, giving myself some passive healing, which is huge. But before I could say goodbye to the early game, there was one last challenge standing in my way. But before I take on the next boss altar, I decided to prepare myself a little more, so I sail on over to Nodgooge. While the Ice Nations have some decent gear, most of it I can't use yet. Fortunately for me, since the level cap is at 40, I'm able to nab these pants, offering me some better survivability. Which, spoiler alert, do absolutely nothing at all to help me for this next fight. Rymek Luke is a force to be reckoned with, having incredible range and being capable of hitting extremely hard. I didn't even bother trying to attack him for the most part, as I left that for my puppets to take care of. My main goal was simply to outmaneuver him, because one hit from this guy can delete pretty much all of my health. Luke will do all kinds of things like fire multiple shots, roll around, plant dynamite, blind you, snipe you from afar. It doesn't seem like there's nothing he can't do. His biggest weakness is that he often has to stop and reload, but with my strategy, I didn't even need to worry about abusing that. I primarily used Hull to launch myself back and forth, avoiding his shots. Staying far back also allowed me to get a better viewpoint of his shots and where he planted his dynamite. As my puppets chipped away at him, there was a point where I ended up getting blasted and hit down pretty low, so let this be proof of why I can't afford to be reckless. But after quickly healing up, the puppets were capable of disposing him. Honestly, this fight is extremely dangerous to the unprepared, and the best advice I can offer is to simply outrun this guy. Do not try to face tank his attacks. This is a battle of endurance you likely won't win. But with that being said, Rymek Luke marked the final battle of the early game. So with high hopes, I ventured onward into the mid-game. Glad you got here when you did though. Some phony came through saying he was the expert. Clearly he just wanted to take your contract money. Oh no, why would anyone do such a thing? Okay, I need to get out of here, go, go, go! After my perfectly legal financial gain, I quickly popped by the merchants in Levigar with my eyes mostly set on this particular chestplate. However, I do know that starting at level 45, I have a few more options back over at the Isles of Fiction, so I decided to head over there instead. After a bit of debating and calculating, I ended up purchasing the entire elf set and the ornament set, along with this relic. I won't be able to use it for a little bit, but at least I have a good set of armor planned out. But until I can use that, I decided to head back over to the Ice Nations and pick up the Nodgooge Warrior chestplate. Unfortunately, it does require me to complete Ice Nations though, so after quickly raiding some ghost pirates, I'm able to put it on. With that out of the way, I'm quickly approaching the level cap, so I wander over to Nessac. Once I arrive, I figured it was probably time to pick up a new helmet, so I grab Wooljaw and put it on. Now that I reached the level cap, I actually had two options. But considering one of those options was Ice Barrows, I actually only had one option. Yeah, no, I ain't going into Ice Barrows willingly. The Prisons of Souls was honestly not very difficult. There are two main enemies you have to fight. One that fires projectiles and remains stationary, and another that runs around like a maniac. Fortunately, thanks to the sheer number of puppets I had, I was able to kill two birds with one stone. Or two undead with 6 puppets and an effigy, but that doesn't roll off the tongue quite the same. Luckily for me, it seems that while both have 2 phases, one of them died right as the other hit phase 2, making my job a bit easier. I was primarily focusing on hitting the enslaved as he darted around, mostly so I didn't have to fight 2 enemies at once. While I didn't take that much damage, I also couldn't just repeatedly face take hits. If I wanted to do that, I would have picked Paladin. So I implemented my usual strategy, which involved me casting Haul frequently to go flying over their head, avoiding as much damage as possible, and casting a few auras whenever I could. This strategy seems to be pretty effective, as after a little bit, the boss was obliterated by my little goblins. Glad to finally have an easy boss altar. Unfortunately, all this means is that it's now time for what I personally think is the worst dungeon to ever grace the earth. Last time, I suffered for around 2 hours just trying to get to Theoric, so I'm just crossing my fingers that I don't have to deal with that again. Luckily, the guards seem to actually respawn this time around, and I'm able to get through on my first try. Oh, wait, this means I get to fight Theoric now? Yippee, I'm so excited. To start off, No, don't do that. I swapped to third person to get a better view of my surroundings. Theoric will very frequently set down traps, and I don't want to walk into those as I'll get frozen in place, leaving me susceptible to his flying icicles. One thing I definitely don't regret doing this fight is continuing my heavy defense investment, as it seems to be paying off very well, as my totem and my passive health regen are doing a pretty good job at keeping me healthy. I do end up getting frozen twice back to back, and I begin to worry about my health dropping, so I throw down another totem in an effort to save myself. But besides that little hiccup, Theoric eventually succumbs to the puppets, claiming me another victory and ending my trip to hell and back. There's now another big jump in the next level cap, but unfortunately it's not quite enough to allow me to wear all the armor I had planned out, but it'll at least allow me to use most of it. But until I get the chance to do that, I have to kill a few quests in order to level up. Ah, Nessa. Oh god, I recognize that voice. No! Damn, that poor robot really seems to be suffering. Wait, no, don't come over! Deciding Gavel wasn't quite meant for me, I fled back to Nessac, where I was finally able to put on my new elf set. So, full of Christmas cheer, even though it's almost June, I figured what better way to celebrate the holidays than to go spread some jolliness. Why hello, good sir, would you like to sing a Christmas carol with me? You might want to leave. There is nothing in this graveyard. This place is private. Jeez, fine, you could have just said no thank you. Friggin', I'll go spread Christmas cheer somewhere else. Asshole! Figuring the good people of Trums could do with some cheering up, I attempted to go and visit them until I was greeted by the mini-boss that guards the Great Bridge. All in all, this guy wasn't very threatening, as the most he did was tickle me, but even then he didn't want to get into the holiday spirit. I mean, come on, I get it, it's summer, but that doesn't mean you have to wait, it's never too early to celebrate! As I entered Trums, I quickly popped by the weapon merchant to purchase Moonlight. It's not great or anything, but I definitely need a new relic as I've been using the tempo totem for 15 levels now. And earth damage is not what I want to have when I'm going to fight Slycar. Now, Slycar is one ooey gooey boy, throwing slime all over the arena, which not only slows you down, but poisons you. This isn't too much of an issue, however, as my totems are able to recover just about the same health as I'm taking from poison. Also, little does Slycar know, but I've got a little secret weapon called Commander, which boosts the attack speed of all of my puppets. And using this little trick, I'm able to completely shred this guy to bits, despite the fact that I have no mana regen whatsoever. Look, normally Slycar is a bit of a tricky fight, but Summoner is just too much for him to handle, and honestly, I was pretty worried going into this based off my previous fight with him, but this time I was able to make quick work of him. Guess that just proves who the better shaman is. With Slycar taken care of, it was time for the next boss altar, but luckily for me, it's at level 55, which allows me to complete the ornament set and finally use that relic I purchased a while back. Wait, Holiday Spirit? Nah, turn it back on, it's time for Christmas, baby! Now all we need is mistletoe. And speaking of mistletoe, the next boss is someone I know a lot of you would like to encounter under the mistletoe. Yeah, that's right, I'm talking to you, you freak. Anyway, sexy mask aside, the Plague Doctor is actually really difficult unless you have a good way of dealing single target damage. Two of the biggest challenges are that he resists all elements, and furthermore, his stupid little bugs will never die. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that, I quite literally mean they will never die, as they will always multiply when you kill them. So, because I didn't want the arena to get out of control, I quickly edited my tree prior to the fight to unlock Bullwhip, which forces my puppets and effigies to target whatever enemy I hit with Uproot. This makes the fight a lot easier to consistently get damage on the Doctor, rather than my puppets targeting random bugs that will spawn to no end. I also make sure to stay in range of my totem to get as much health back as possible, because it does appear that the Doctor can potentially two-shot me. I do end up bailing at some point to use some potions out of safety, but other than that, I'm able to keep him locked in place to constantly strike him with my spells. I'm not sure this fight would have been doable without Bullwhip, so I definitely don't regret my decision. But, word of advice, just focus on him and don't even bother trying to attack his minions. As relieved as I am to have conquered another boss altar, I can't start celebrating quite yet as I have to challenge 2 more back to back. Wonderful. The first one is a boss altar that the majority of us may be familiar with, Tribal Sanctuary. This is the only boss altar that is tied to a quest line, so if you've ever done the passage, this place is gonna look very familiar. Fortunately, this boss altar isn't terribly difficult, and if you can quickly clear out the mass amount of mobs, you should be fine. This guy only has a single attack, being multi-hit. Wait, one attack? Pfft, move over, Hasher. I discovered pretty early on that his multi-hit doesn't do that much to me, so I just end up face tanking most of his hits until he goes down. It's also worth noting that the antic beads he drops can be used in the Ibiju village at the tribal merchant for some pretty unique masks. While these masks are normally pretty good for a casual playthrough, I don't quite think they'll make the cut for me this time around. Moving on, it's time to once again set sail for the sea, as the Magmastream Core is located on the Volcanic Isles. I decided I didn't feel like waiting until level 60, so I challenged it a bit early. This boss wasn't too bad, but it can catch you by surprise if you're not careful. The real kicker here is that this boss doesn't have any CCI or crowd control immunity, meaning that you can push it, pull it, knock it back, slow it down.
Bop it, twist it, pull it, bend it, flip it, extend it, load it. What?
The scariest part for me is when it comes crashing down to deal its massive explosion damage. I managed to dodge it with no issues, but I primarily just huddle my totems the whole time for the passive healing to keep me healthy. Despite this, I actually recommend doing this boss if you can, because phage pins are absolutely goated, and they can only be obtained as a potential drop from this fight. And I was actually lucky enough to even get them, although I also wasn't lucky because I can't even use them, so, yeah. Moving on, because I was in the neighborhood, I decided to sail back over to the Isles of Fiction. After browsing their wares once more, I make a questionable decision looking back on it now. The merchant that offers the elf set also offers another set known as the Saint set. All in all, it's a very tanky set, but the damage is absolutely atrocious. But seeing as it's literally a better version of the elf set, after running the calcs, I decide to pick it up for future use. I also make sure to pick up Anthem, which is another tanky relic that I can use in just a couple levels. You've probably noticed, but I've been prioritizing tanky builds this whole run, and it's paid off relatively well, and thanks to my puppets, I'm able to get away with it. Although, I'm not sure if that's going to be the case much longer. Alright, let's see. Follow the children to school. Huh? There's a Wibble out there that wants to kill us all! Psh, yeah, right. Good thing I won't ever have to deal with that. Now it was time for Redbeard, but before I go inside, I make sure to unlock what is probably one of my new favorite abilities, Hummingbirds. These little guys give you a passive walk speed buff, but you can optionally send them into fight, and boy were they helpful. After I clear out his minions, I send my Hummingbirds right away, and you can see just how quickly they demolish Redbeard. It's not even funny. I do end up making a really stupid mistake though. As I go to use a potion, I accidentally hit F1 and end up sort of running around like a headless chicken trying to fix the situation. I honestly don't know how it happened or what the hell I was doing, but besides that blunder, the fight was over in like 15 seconds. It was great, honestly. So with Redbeard out of the way, there was one final challenge remaining for me in the mid-game, and that was the Arena of Legends, located within... Wait, I have to complete the Temple of Legends? Oh, you motherfucker. So, being forced to do this unbearable quest, I am led to a man named... Jorkin? Seriously, that's your name? Okay. Ugh, alright, I ventured into an incredibly dangerous cave at the roots of corruption, and then traveled all the way over to Mage Island, and then came all the way back here. Here's your stupid dust. Oh god, you want something else? What do you mean you want something else? Okay, yeah, hi. You're the dude I'm supposed to talk to. Yes. Can you please go to Rybeck, the Durnal Jungle, the Morrow Peaks, and Seavale Reef, please? You're kidding, right? Hey man, I'm back. I got the stuff you asked for. It only took me an hour of my life that I'm never getting back. Yeah, okay, great. Shut up and give me the damn helmet. Okay, now will you let me in? Oh, right. I have to kill something. Okay. As annoying as Temple of Legends is, gathering the items unfortunately isn't the main problem here. The main problem is actually the fact that I have to fight the Corruptor of Worlds. This guy is fast, he can stunlock you, and I'm using a gear set that is meant for level 50. Did I mention the fact that I don't even get a whole set bonus because I have to wear this stupid purple hat? Honestly, going into this boss, I had zero strategy, and it was extremely chaotic. What did catch me by surprise though was the fact that I was able to tank his attacks surprisingly well. It's pretty obvious to see, but the puppets and effigies were shredding his health bar while I was getting slapped around all over the place. I also tried summoning my hummingbirds to go after him as well, since I knew there wouldn't be any outrunning him. Anytime I got thrown out of my totem range, I immediately hauled back over to it, as the totem healing plus my HPR was basically the only way I was ever going to make it through this fight. Miraculously, somehow I actually ended up taking down the Corruptor of Issues without any Corruptor of Issues. Corruptor of Worlds is what I meant to say. Miraculously, I actually ended up taking down the Corruptor without any severe issues. There we go. That's better. Okay, yeah, here you go. Now get out of my face. So, with 2 hours of my life gone, I proceeded to do what would be my final mid-game challenge. Going into the fight, I decided to keep the Purified Helmet of Legends on just for the sake of mana regen and a bit more health, and honestly, I'm pretty glad I did, considering I got down to about half health during this fight. The fight wasn't too bad overall though. While the majority of the time he wasn't in range of my totems to get hit by Aura Spell, Bullwhip and the occasional Hummingbird attacks made up for it. I didn't realize he actually had several phases, and honestly, it felt like a never-ending cycle for the most part until he finally went down, concluding the mid-game. But with that final boss defeated, I had successfully managed to make it all the way through the early game and the mid-game using only merchant items. And if you thought this was the end, you'd be surely mistaken, as I've only covered about half of the main bosses this game has to offer. So next time, I'm going to attempt to finish off this challenge by clearing the late and end game, which will include Kira Hive and Legendary Island, so you're not going to want to miss it. But if you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for your support, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content like this in the future. So until next time, happy adventuring.